G'day, Michael here. Some time ago I did an OS comparison where I compared Linux, Windows and Mac OS X. This time the comparison's more complicated, to say the least. The desktop environments have really, well, they've been evolving, and I guess the real winners are, users of the desktops. I've got to say, looking at the BSD is starting to come as a viable layperson's desktop operating system. It's very hard to describe the stages of which they've had to go through, but FreeBSD is ultimately an open source system like Linux, and we should actually call Linux GNU plus Linux, GNU being basically it's open source software, and Linux is the kernel that's used to run underneath it. In the same way that Android should really be called something like Android plus Linux. You couldn't really compare Android to, say, any of the Linux distributions that are available for PCs. Right, now it is a difficult comparison because it's like comparing a motorcycle to a truck to a train to a bus. It's a really tricky comparison, but I guess the best place to look for comparison is not so much which one is the best, but which attributes are actually going to line up with your needs. And I think most people would be surprised to see what becomes a viable system. I guess the first thing we need to look at is the areas in which people want to use their computers for. Now, on this screen here I happen to have Spotify showing, and that's for good reason. I'm running a Linux desktop here, it's Linux Mint, and you can see I'm running screen recording, and a video camera is running with my smiley face in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. And so I'm able to do common things with this Linux desktop, and there is quite a bit of commercial support, such as the Spotify application, or you can also run 3D CAD packages. Well, the 3D CAD package I use is in fact a commercial package. It's one I've paid for, and there you can see it here. What's another bit of commercial software I use? Well, my 2D CAD package is QCAD. Now that is based on, well, not based on, it is in parallel with an open source CAD package, and it is LibreCAD is kind of the free and open version of QCAD. QCAD's got some enhancements that are definitely worth buying over the free CAD edition. What else have we got going here? Of course, got screen recording. Right, so I'm able to use some commercial software, but I certainly can't buy Adobe, the latest Adobe suite, for either video editing or photo editing, and expect it to just run on Linux. But programs or systems such as virtual machines allow you to get around that, but then you still need the other operating system. So it's a little bit of a waste of time if you want to run one operating system to run another operating system, then run your packages. But it does give us an opportunity that, by and large, you want to use one operating system, but occasionally you need to use another for some specific piece of software that that's a vital organ to whatever you're doing. You can freely do that. So let's just let's just switch to, where's my camera gone? There it is there. I might make this guy sit on every desktop. Now I can set this on every desktop, as you can see here. I've got multiple desktops here, or workspaces, depends on what you want to call them. Different groups call them different things. So what have we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now I've got 9 workspaces. I could change that number to 7 or 3 or 17, whatever number it works for me. This machine has got the resources, so let's just see what resources this machine's got. That'll take me to the right desktop. Okay, so you can see it's showing up 24 cores, so I can get away with doing quite a lot of stuff here. The RAM, I've got 24 gigabytes of RAM, which is about, looks like about 70-ish% full. 63.9%. I can read what's in front of me. And the network traffic's fairly light. Okay, now on this desktop, I've deliberately got, get that going. I've deliberately got 4 virtual machines running. And yes, I managed to get that running. I think my last video is about how to install this. I've developed a quick way of making this happen. If you want to do something outside the scope of that, you can. There may be even better ways of doing it, but the way I show in that video is about as fast as it can possibly be done. In fact, it works out it's pretty much the fastest way to install a virtual operating system outright. So this Hackintosh install is actually quite a quick process. The next easiest ones to install, obviously Linux is really easy to install. BSD, this is Ghost BSD, which it's taken me a little while to get settled in with, but what I've found with the BSDs is there's a very sort of limited, a small amount of software that's installed by default. You really do have to add virtually anything you want running, but it's got pretty much the same range of open source software as Linux. I have found a few things, like I use DOS-MU to run a virtual DOS environment for one of my, well, actually a couple of my vital pieces of software, legacy software for my business. Right, and I have not been able to get anything like the DOS-MU on Linux to run on any of the other 3 systems. It's quite interesting to see how the systems do vary in their whole approach. Now Microsoft has got one really big attribute, and that is there's this huge weight of commercial software and existing software that's well established, that's really built around Microsoft. Now that's a plus for Microsoft, but it's also a bit of a, well, it's actually a big minus as well, and that is because Microsoft has to support so much legacy, and that actually has, for good reason on one hand, but it's on the other hand it's quite a pain. It's encumbered by so much legacy that it has to keep rolling with. People that have bought software, I don't know, for Windows XP or built software around it for a large organization need to be able to run that on any later installations. Otherwise it's a massive amount of infrastructure change for a later development. So it is encumbered by legacy pretty badly, and they've actually handled that pretty well, so I've got to actually take my hat off to them. But what's very interesting is the other 3 systems, which are all essentially a BSD and Mac OS X, have got a common ancestry. They're both BSD based. But of course Apple has done a great job of polishing and delivering a user experience that the wild developed stuff hasn't. But of course the servers, running on the internet, you've either got BSD running them or you've got Linux running them. Now, without exception, the top 500 supercomputers in the world are all running Linux. People like Google and Facebook are using Linux, but people such as Netflix are using BSD. So, they're well and truly proven. The 2 open source systems are well and truly proven as server grade material, and there's certainly no, you cannot take that away from them. They're both the champions of running the world as far as computers are concerned. People think they're using their Apple or their Windows computer, but really the guts of what most people are doing is actually happening on Linux and BSD, even if they don't know it. So that is something. The 2 open source bundles are actually, they are the bulk of our computing power is delivered to us by those two systems. It is not delivered to us by Apple and Microsoft. You'll most likely be standing in front of a Windows-based machine, but you're most likely using the horsepower behind the scenes of the two open source systems. So you can see there's a massive difference in their weight and value and application. These guys are like, I don't know, a good comparison. What's a good comparison? I don't know, like your great tankers and trains and buses and yeah, big stuff. Well, these are more like sort of a motorcycle or a scooter or something. That's probably the best example I can come up with. It might be pretty lousy, but there we go. All right, so Apple has delivered a really good, smooth, commercial desktop experience, and pretty easy to find your way around if you don't know where to start. You can work your way. I do find some of their logic's back to front to my thinking, but that might be just historical, what I've come up with. I kind of grew up on Windows, yeah, and I've moved across to Linux, and the real reason I guess that I moved across to Linux is actually that Achilles heel of supporting legacy. What the irony is I get much better legacy support out of Linux than I do out of Windows, but the way it's delivered is you've got basically the newest possible operating system running underneath, and backwards compatibility is provided by applications that run on top of it, not systemic backwards compatibility, but an add-on on the outside. And you can see right in front of you, I've got 4 operating systems running on top of Linux here, and that, let's just run another one. Let's run the DOS emulator, there we go. View what that was. Now this is a piece of software which I've written myself that handles designs parametrically. Just plus this guy. And what you don't see here, this is really a piece of CAM software. It controls actual machine paths on robotics that I've actually written the software for. And I've also got the robotics interface written to run on DOS. But this system here allows me to print using the latest print drivers on the Linux machine. So this DOS emulator actually provides me forwards compatibility with my latest printers, which DOS itself could never provide. So I've actually gained quite a bit of forwards compatibility out of legacy software because I'm running this inside a Linux box. If I had the machine running DOS only, I wouldn't have the networking, I wouldn't be able to read and write files from a server, I wouldn't be able to use the network printers, but in this virtual environment you just basically share Linux resources out, such as file and print sharing, to the DOS as if it was virtual hardware plugged into the DOS, which is having this support here is actually better legacy support for DOS-based software than you can get out of any of the other 3. I could not get DOS-MU to run on BSD. I've gone around the internet left, right and centre to see if anyone had successfully compiled it. Theoretically it should be possible, but obviously it's deeper and more involved than what I'm capable of doing in the time frame that I've spent, and it may be something that's out of my depth anyway. Both BSD and Mac OS, from their common heritage, software such as DOSBox does give some of the level of support that DOS-MU does, but DOS-MU is definitely a much fuller support, and that's running on this computer right here, which is running Linux Mint. This virtual machine, which is running under Linux Mint, is running Ubuntu. This virtual machine is running GhostBSD. This virtual machine is running Windows 10 Pro. I've enabled the Pro license, so it gives a little bit better networking and a few other bits and bobs. And of course Mac OS. So you can see the weight of legacy support, and sideways and backwards and forwards compatibility is actually best provided on this system here by Linux. Linux now has got things like Steam software to run, the game platform. So it's kind of now number 2 for the. Let's close that. For the gaming platforms. So you've got Windows is still probably number 1. Linux is a close number 2. Mac close to 3. BSD is a bit out in the cold still for that. It hasn't got that sort of mainstream. Although the Ghost BSD is based on a system called TrueOS. Now, TrueOS is kind of acting like Ubuntu does in the Linux world. Now, a lot of other systems are based on Ubuntu. Ghost BSD is based on TrueOS. I've also discovered another one. Let me just have a look at that. Called Trident. Let's see if we've got enough juice to run all this. Hopefully the machine won't have a heart attack. I'm now running 6 modern operating systems on the same machine. So I'm asking a fair bit of it. Let's let Trident run up. Now Trident is the project as a spin-off of TrueOS, and Ghost BSD is a spin-off from Trident. So it's so TrueOS is actually forward testing ahead of FreeBSD and sharing back. They're actually doing some seriously good work. BSD has got an approach to development which is very different to, say, the GNU Linux approach. Now, GNU Linux is GPL, I think 2 or 3. Basically, if you use the source code, you're free to do that, but you've got to share back any modifications you do. Okay, so I'll just log in this guy. I've got to say I like this Trident project system. These 3 are all running the Mate desktop. I noticed that the system on Ubuntu and when I use Mate on Linux Mint is a little bit further developed. Now Linux Mint is what I'm running on this machine here, and it is based on Ubuntu. So let's go back to that again. So the system I'm running the whole computer on is actually based on Ubuntu. Trident is kind of the Ubuntu, and Ghost BSD is kind of like the Linux Mint, relatively speaking. So this is a child of that. The main system that's running underneath all this is a child of this. Mac OS is a cousin of these BSDs, and Windows is something completely different. Yeah, so it's the interrelation between the different things is it's complex. So because of the historical basis of all these bits and pieces, they actually have such a different applications. But you could actually argue the newest systems are these top 2. OS X is actually an older system, and so is Microsoft, just for the development format. Now the reason why I can say that is these are the pioneering open source, constantly being developed, latest bleeding edge, maybe just chew it up a little bit, so maybe there's a knock back a notch of say 6 months. Whereas Windows and Mac OS are both a little bit more conservative in the development. Yeah, so very interesting. Now what I've done, let's just see if we can tidy up this. Hello. Tidy up that. What I have found is that most of this stuff works pretty well. The software available, I might just desktop tidy. Now this is Mate desktop. I've installed a number of different desktops. The icons for some reason have got very wild sizes. Now this is meant to be the same size icon as all the rest. But in any case, let's just open the App Cafe. That's TrueOS's. You can see Trident's based on TrueOS. Installed, pending, web browsers, email clients, Office suites. Let's just see what Office suites we've got. There's LibreOffice installed. Let's just install that. And you can see the process of installing something. Let's just do that. And off it goes. It'll start installing it. Here you can see the pending. It's busy doing its thing. It doesn't really give much information. Now this I have to install on the BSD based systems, which is all well and good. On Ubuntu it just works, it's already installed. So straight off the bat, Ubuntu actually gives you quite a comprehensively useful operating system, more useful than either Microsoft or Apple, without installing extra software. You've got Office package, you've got photo editing software. I might just qualify that a little bit. Microsoft with the latest update has just given a nice 3D like 3D creation software for tinkering and editing videos. So that's kind of nice that they've done that. On Linux you can install a lot of different stuff from the repository. Let's just have a look here. Where am I? Control Center, there we go. Let's go to the software boutique. So BSD's kind of got quite an easy way of doing things. So we can keep browsing. It's still busy doing that install, but we'll wait for it to catch up. We can search, I don't know, what do you want to do here? We test for something. Let's just search for something. Test Disk is a nice piece of software. Okay, so that's for recovering SD cards and USB sticks and any drives really, with a great range of file system types. So, I found quite handy if you've deleted your SD card on your camera, like formatted it, taken some photos and formatted it again, you can still actually recover photos, provided the area of the disk actually hasn't been written on, from 2 formats ago. So it's pretty cool. I'll just click on install. Yeah, let's do that. So we've got 2 pending. So LibreOffice is pretty heavy. I'll move that out of the road so I can see what I'm doing here. Okay, now this is the software boutique on Ubuntu. You can see it's more polished than the BSD version. Education. What have we got? Let's just resize this so it's a bit more useful. Waiting. There we go. When you resize the virtual machines, you've got to give them a few seconds. Periodic table data. Let's install that. I'll just get it to apply the changes. Got to give it a password. Yeah, so LibreOffice is still taking its time on BSD. Let's just, can we open it? Finished. I'm assuming that turns up in either education or science or something. Periodic table, there you go. Okay, so that's what we've just installed. Periodic table of elements. Legend series, what is that all about? Okay, so it's a good educational tool. And we just installed that very easily. We haven't had to go scratching around for a CD or license codes or anything like that. And it's just easy. It's very, very pleasant. So, and I found there is a greater weight of software available for Linux than there is for BSD. But watch this space. I think that's coming. This is definitely a lot easier than the BSDs I played with a few years ago, and it's more desktop oriented. I wouldn't be surprised if in a year's time these two might be very close peers for a desktop user. They've obviously got great capacity for server-based systems, but as a lay user like you and me, yeah, this one, I'd watch this space. I have also thought about deploying this out of one of my machines in the workshop, because there's a kind of a solidness that, yeah, it's hard to explain. It feels good, yeah, when you do things with it. Long story. Okay, so these 2 open source bundles I can really see taking, well, BSD picking up in the next year or so to be quite important. Linux is there now. It is already good for mums and dads and, lay users. It installs easily, gives you good software, it's easy to get hold of. You don't really need commercial software to do just about anything you're likely to do. And you can get commercial software for specific things. And as you can see in this whole system here, I'm able to run, in a virtual machine any other piece of software I need to anyway if I have to in a pinch. But I would try to dodge using virtual machines to do that kind of work. But it's good running virtual machines so I can test different systems. Yeah, so how do we have a conclusion on this? I'm not sure we can ever get a conclusion, but I would say the three of these things is not like the other. One of these things is not like the other. Three of these things is kind of the same. Well, in a sense, broad deployment. You've got probably, as in hardware generally, it's definitely Linux is the broadest installed, can run the widest range of hardware, and has the biggest range of software on tap without competition. There's nothing to match it. Okay. In the blue corner over here, we have Windows out on its own as commercial support for desktop software. It stands well in front, runs more hardware than the other commercial operating system, which is Mac. However, Mac does it really well too, and you've got very good packages for video editing and graphic arts available from Mac. That's where BSD has a great shortcomings, although there is a fair bit in common with Linux in that area. But it's coming fast. I wouldn't rule it out. In a year's time, or even by the time I finish making this video, someone may have already bumped this up a notch, because development is fast between Linux and BSD. Development is very fast. The two commercial bundles are slow. Philosophically, the winners are definitely BSD and Linux, because they are there for you. Security-wise, these two are the winners outright. There is no spying done by either of these systems on you. There is some reporting if you choose it. In any case, different Linux bundles have different levels of security and openness. I guess that's another thing to bear in mind. With operating systems, security does not equal ease of use. It's like having a lock on the door. You have to unlock it with a key, yada yada, to get in, versus if the door's just push open like a saloon door sort of thing. So yeah, if you're expecting security, there is some extra hoops to hop through when you're doing things with it. On the security note, well, that's just fascinating. I have a number of friends who have Apple computers, and one friend has three laptops, 3 MacBooks. One of them had, well, it's old. Basically, the battery had come to end of life, and so it has to stay plugged into a power point. Apple won't sell a battery for it, so it's a perfectly functional computer running an older system, but it's still doing whatever it did. So no disrespect to the computer, but it can't get a battery for it, so it's a bit stuck in the corner. Okay, if it was any other brand hardware, you could get a third-party battery for it, no problem. Yeah, so the hardware on Apple is very restricted. Okay, laptop number 2 that he had was caught in a boot loop. Just come up, black screen, bit of text, reboot. Black screen, bit of text, reboot. I ended up just installing Linux Mint, which is exactly what I'm looking at here. This very same system I installed on the MacBook. And the only thing I had to do was install a network driver, which I had to go scratching around for. It was a legacy network driver in a relatively new laptop. So the hardware on Apple is frequently old hardware, not latest hardware. Everyone else sees it as 2 or 3 year old or 4 year old piece of hardware, and Apple that's the current hardware in many cases. So it's quite funny how they think they're new and whatever, but they tend to use older hardware. Alright, so that was MacBook 2, which I fixed by putting Linux on it. MacBook 3, they'd forgotten their passwords. I had it stashed while they did some home renovations, and they'd forgotten all their passwords. 3 users, lots of photos, lots of files. Couldn't get access to it, so I booted this same Linux Mint that you see here, this very same system, on a live distribution, and was able to copy their files and photos out, even though it was password protected. Linux just saw the files, so the security is pointless. The same is true for Windows. The passwords on both these two systems seem to be there just to stop the people who should be able to use their computer from using their computer. But particularly Windows is open to the back door for so many, so much malware and misuse. I've read recently that antivirus software is really about 25% effective. Yeah, Mac doesn't suffer anywhere near the same malware problems, but we come back to Linux and BSD. pretty much don't need antivirus software. Every now and again, when I'm feeling a bit nervous because some threat's being put around the internet, that's been done. Yep, done. So close that. So now I've got LibreOffice installed. Applications, Office, anytime. LibreOffice, I don't know. Right, there we go. Yep, so LibreOffice is now installed on that while we're talking. Yeah, what was I saying? Yes, the security on the two open source systems is fundamentally part of the system. And when a fault is found, it's fixed within days. Microsoft and Apple will tend to actually keep it a secret until they've got a fix, and then they roll out a fix. And things like, you know, using Norton's or Trend Micro or, you know, whatever antivirus, anti-malware software is kind of maintained by third parties. It's not really defended well by the system itself. I know Windows 10 has done a fair bit to improve security within itself, but it is fundamentally it's a big target, so it's an easy target. Yeah. Whereas these other two systems, BSD and Linux, they're not such a soft target, and they don't share much of your information unless you want it to be so. Yeah, there's plenty of information around what sort of information, I'm going to call it spyware, that Microsoft themselves put on to check out what software, whether you've got all licensed software, etc. These other two, there is none of that. You're using open source software, you're free to use, free to modify even, free to share around. But it is not the same as shareware. Do not mix open source and shareware. It's a big deal. Yes, I guess in conclusion, we now actually have 4 desktop operating systems. Linux is more broadly useful than BSD at the moment. That may not be for long. It actually supports more legacy than Windows, but it's not encumbered by legacy like Windows is. Apple, it's kind of there on the side as being a nice system. Yeah, it's nice, but it's not all that. You know what I'm saying? Alright, so depending on what your preferences are, I guess that's it. Well, if you've got anything else to add to that, feel free to make a comment. If I've missed something, if there's something I haven't covered, please let me know in the comments below. If there's something you'd like me to expand on, or yeah, something I've got wrong perhaps, feel free to make a comment in the comments below. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, ask a question, leave a comment. Bye for now.